Hey folks, it's Charlie in Westeros here, this time with a new video intended to inaugurate a new chapter of my channel by discussing the currently planned Game of Thrones prequel series, The House of the Dragon. As some of you know, I held a poll a little while ago to feel out how you folks felt about the early official set photos that were released for the series. Though excitement at the prequel wasn't necessarily unanimous, it seems like there was enough interest there for me to start making videos on the House of the Dragon. And so today I shall be discussing my expectations and my personal hopes for the prequel series, especially if we should wish to avoid having a repeat of the 8th season of Game of Thrones, and desire a decent retelling of the tale that was the Targaryen Civil War. Meanwhile, in the second half of this video, I will give my early reaction and thoughts on the 5 or so official photos that were released about a month or two ago. Before I jump into my expectations and hopes, however, please don't hesitate to hit the subscribe button if you'd like to watch more videos on the Game of Thrones or A Song of Ice and Fire world, as well as see some content on real-world mythology and legends from our own world. Anyway, without further ado, let's jump right into discussing my hopes. Specifically, character development. One thing that Game of Thrones did especially well, most notably in the earlier seasons, was the manner in which the characters were developed. Whether it came to Daenerys, the Lannisters, the Starks, or heck, even some side characters, the TV series truly did a fantastic job of translating George R. R. Martin's characters on screen during the first half of GOT. Understanding Jon's uncomfortable, even awkward place among the Starks, the nature of Daenerys and her brother's sad state, and even the complicated relationships between, well, all the Lannisters, were instrumental in setting the stage of a very complicated web of plots, intrigues, and conflicts that kept so many of us hooked on the show for so long. Strong character development is something that, in my mind, can absolutely make or break a TV series. And with Game of Thrones, sticking to the source material in this regard truly helped to build the show to its iconic status. This may seem somewhat controversial now, given how it all ended, but I would even venture to say that some of the showrunner choices during the earlier seasons in making their own minor additions to the characters' interactions, in fact helped the overall story. A couple of scenes come to mind, most notably the Season 1 conversation between Robert and Cersei on the nature of their marriage, as well as the talk between Cersei and Prince Joffrey on what it means to be a king, both of which were not in the books. I felt that these scenes added to the overall interest and even nuanced view that we as the viewers had or could have for these generally complex characters. I know I'm digressing away from the topic at hand a little, but I guess my point is twofold. The obvious first is that strong character arcs will help House of the Dragon, whereas the second is based more around the differing nature of the source material for this prequel and Game of Thrones. Fire and Blood, the stories that make up the foundation for this Targaryen prequel series, aren't as elaborate as the A Song of Ice and Fire books were, and I think this is both a blessing and a curse for the spin-off. It's a blessing because without having the first-person perspective that was lacking in Fire and Blood, but was present in A Song of Ice and Fire, the show will have the benefit of taking a certain number of creative liberties. A lot of information we are given in Fire and Blood is through the perspective of maesters, witnesses to the events of the Civil War, as well as historians who did not necessarily live during the era in question. Given that freedom, however, too much freedom can sometimes be a show's undoing, and I think this is the curse of what the show will have to grapple with when it comes to further developing the main characters of the show. It could theoretically be for the better or for the worse. This also feeds into my second main point, and that is using Fire and Blood effectively. While I think I've made my point on character development, I obviously cannot downplay the important place of a strong story. In this sense, I think House of the Dragon is actually better positioned to do some great things. Fire and Blood gives us the broad strokes of a very complicated family feud, yet even with just those broad strokes, I find the story of the Targaryen Civil War to be incredibly fascinating. Better yet, and unlike with A Song of Ice and Fire, we actually have a clear ending to the Targaryen Civil War. In a sense, there isn't really the same risk of certain storylines being lost or plot points being rushed necessarily. I believe that by sticking to the main plot points from the book and through creatively elaborating on some of the less clear-cut parts of the story, House of the Dragon has every opportunity to be the making of an epic spin-off series. With both my first and second point in mind, however, I think it is important to restate that a strong character development and story retelling does not necessarily mean character gatekeeping, whereby some creative choices should be permitted and encouraged. I will touch more on that when I discuss the cast photos, but overall I would say that the casting seems to generally be off to a good start. I had a few more ideas that I would like to convey in this video, but I think I will save those for a later video. For now, I want to jump into discussing my thoughts on the first official photos. So I'll try to keep this succinct since my thoughts are a bit, dated now, but I'll basically go in order of the character photos I found the least appealing to the most appealing. First on this list is Matt Smith as Daemon Targaryen. So, when Matt was originally announced as Daemon, I will admit I was having trouble envisioning the former Doctor Who actor as the Rogue Prince. With the first official photo released featuring the Targaryen prince, I will admit my sentiment didn't really change too much. That said, I am not about to discount the casting choice because Matt Smith is a fantastic actor, and I am hopeful he will do the character justice. I think part of the issue is that, for now at least, he reminds me a bit too much of Viserys in terms of his overall look, and doesn't quite convey the imposing figure that I expect from Daemon. But still, I am staying optimistic with this casting choice. The next character on my list is Otto Hightower, as portrayed by Rhys Ifans. So I really don't have any criticism here to be honest, but I did put Otto Hightower as my second to last just because his look didn't particularly stand out to me personally, though I suppose he seems to look the part of the character. The one thing I did appreciate was that he is sporting the classic Hand of the King pin, which is perhaps the first thing that we see as a uniform symbol between both this prequel and Game of Thrones itself. And I admittedly did get a little excited about that. Emma Darcy as Rhaenyra Targaryen is next, as my third, and is squarely in the middle for a few reasons. Rhaenyra is probably one of my favorite characters in the overall A Song of Ice and Fire mythos, especially as far as Targaryens go. Unfortunately for House of the Dragon, however, is that my expectations may be a little too high for this character in terms of her overall portrayal and appearance. While I don't dislike her look, it did leave me wanting a little more. For example, this artistic representation of Rhaenyra from the World of Ice and Fire, or even this other image of her from the Game of Thrones special features DVDs, conveys what I feel is the more Targaryen personality that she is said to have had. In fairness to the actress, however, I am being a little hasty in judging the appearance from a single frame, and I truthfully know next to nothing about Emma Darcy. The costume also seems a bit plain for a Targaryen princess, but it does seem somewhat different from what we've seen on Westerosi royal women during Game of Thrones. Long story short, I need to see more. Anyway, moving things along, Olivia Cooke as Alicent Hightower was my second favorite character photo. So there are a few things that really sold me in terms of this portrayal. The green of her clothes is of course the first thing that caught my attention, as it will come to symbolize her faction from the Targaryen Civil War, but the image conveys something that reminds me of the characters of Marjorie or even Olenna Tyrell. It's that somewhat conniving or plotting way she looks sideways in the photo that really got me thinking that this woman has intentions of obtaining a semblance of power or importance. Put bluntly, I am immediately reminded of the following line delivered by Marjorie Tyrell in Season 2.
I want to be the queen.
Thus, I am really looking forward to see what Olivia Cooke does with the character of Alicent Hightower. And now, and apparently this might be controversial, but I can honestly say that my favorite photo was Steve Toussaint as Lord Corlys Velaryon. By now, I suspect the debate around whether black actors can or should portray the Valyrians has been discussed ad nauseum, so without going on too long a tangent on the matter, I will say this. The Valyrians in the books have a very unique appearance, and specifically with respect to their purple eyes, their silver gold hair, and yes, their pale skin. However, I truly believe the very purpose of their unique appearance is to point out the fact that the Valyrians were a race that had been warped by magic, and therefore quite different from other men in that respect. As such, and in my opinion of course, casting the Valyrian family is relatively inconsequential, and could actually be beneficial for the purpose of storytelling, I would say. Despite their book description, the Targaryens in the TV series don't have purple eyes, nor are they necessarily pale to the point of appearing insanely different from other humans. Considering Game of Thrones already took some pretty noticeable creative liberties with respect to the Targaryens, I really don't think it removes or changes anything that the Valyrians are black. If anything, it simply helps to emphasize the fact that the people of Valyria are not somehow different as a result of their genetic or ethnic origins, but more so as a result of their supernatural or magical nature. Giving the Valyrian family the light blonde hair that seems to be characteristic of the show-only Valyrian people is more than sufficient to show that they share a common quasi-supernatural origin with the Targaryens, all the while easily being able to show that the Valyrians and the Targaryens are in fact two distinct families from Valyria. Besides, I think some of George R. R. Martin's recent comments demonstrate that he clearly doesn't have a problem with the casting, and if it's good enough for George, well, then it's good enough for me. Now, to go back to Steve Toussaint as Lord Corlys, I think the actor looks truly badass. The blonde white dreads, to the blazon of House Valyrian on his vestment as he stands overlooking what looks to be the Narrow Sea is just so perfect for the character. He truly conveys the persona of the book character who was more than worthy of commanding the fleet of the Seven Kingdoms, but again, that's just my personal opinion. Well, folks, those were just my early hopes, expectations for House of the Dragon, as well as my first thoughts on the official photos that have been released for the prequel series so far. Do you agree with my concerns I raised? Do you disagree with my perspective on the casting so far? I more than welcome your thoughts in the comment section below, as I am always curious to hear what others have to say on the matter. Anyway, I will leave things at that for now. Please don't hesitate to like, subscribe if you enjoyed, and of course I will see you all next time.